A warm welcome to BrightBond, the podcast about real human connections across generations, cultures, and everyday life, anywhere and everywhere. I'm Patrick Duriaux, and here we share real conversations that leaves you with practical ideas to create more connection at home, at work, or in your community. Today's podcast is a very interesting topic. The theme of this podcast is use tech, but don't let it use you. Or, in other words, we're going to talk about our usage of smartphone, tablet, social media, AI. It's a very current topic. A lot of people are talking about it at the moment. And I'm very happy to talk about this topic with an expert in the theme and in that area. I'm happy and very happy to welcome Alessandra Patti. Alessandra is a professional trainer and a mental well-being consultant with more than 12 years of experience. She's also lectures at the University of St. Gallen, which is one of the best universities in Switzerland, and she works internationally across industries, training people at different levels of seniority. She also works closely with learning and development and HR professionals, helping people and organizations building healthier habits, stronger awareness, and more human connection in a digital world. Alessandra, it's a real pleasure to have you and welcome to BrightBond.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure for me too, Patrick.
Okay, that's wonderful. So yes, I mentioned, I think it's a great topic, very current topic we have today to discuss together today. Before doing that, I always like to start with a positive note with the podcast and also finishing on a positive note and a bit of warm-up questions. So my first two questions for you is how old are you today and where are you based?
All right. So I'm based in Zurich, Switzerland, and I'm 42, almost 43. So on 4th of April is my birthday. So can we say I'm already 43 maybe?
That's up to you, but it's soon your birthday, so
Almost
that's
there. Yeah,
okay.
almost there.
That's great. And you're based in Zurich in Switzerland, which is a
Mhm.
very beautiful city, of course. It's a very nice
Yeah,
international city. Great.
absolutely.
Wonderful. I also wanted to ask you what gives you energy at the moment, Alessandra?
Well, at the moment, actually, what's giving me energy is the sun because we haven't had it for a few weeks. It was raining for such a long time. It was a very tough winter, so I could feel that the energy is really coming from the sun. And also, actually, these past days, it has come also from having new connections in my life, having new people in my network. So it's quite on topic with what you do, the power of human connection. But it's really true for me. It's re-energizing just to have a coffee with a person that I truly admire and like, and it gives me just this good feeling.
Okay, great to hear, and great already talking about things to do to connect, which is wonderful, and
Mhm.
that's really linked with what we're trying to do as well with BrightBond. That's a great intro. I also would like to ask you, when we speak about social media and we
Mhm.
interacted together already, I came to one of your seminar, which was very interesting. Uh, Oftentimes we hear a bit of negativity around social media.
Mm.
So to start maybe and shift and start in the opposite way, starting with positivity, what will be
Yeah.
in your standpoint, maybe one positive way social media can actually support real life connection?
Well, this is a great question because, in a way, we are not here to condemn social media, right? We are not here to say, okay, we're not going to use those parts of technology that actually are already here since a while, right?
Mm.
It's all about use and how it affects you. So, I think that one positive element of social media to create live connections is actually that social media is a good base to create live meetings. So you see how probably you haven't been in touch with somebody, think of LinkedIn in your professional environment, or just think of the old Facebook somehow, or Instagram, even like any other form of social media that is now popular, that you might start a contact there. And then what about bringing into life if it's a real, genuine interest? So I think it's a good base for us also to explore interests that can become analog. So think about, a podcast club, a book club, how this could be starting on a group on LinkedIn or something that you have in common. And then why don't we bring it into the analog life? Of course, this entails an effort from the side of people, but I think social media could be a very good base for that.
Okay, that's great. And that's true that sometimes people don't think about groups. You're right to say that we can be very, again, using social media by ourselves. And of course, there's a lot of different groups who exist already. And that's maybe a very good tip for people to connect with other groups, connect with new groups as well, as you said, to create real life connection. That's very interesting in that standpoint. And I know we're going to continue the conversation and speak a bit more about that. I also wanted to, again, you said something very interesting, which is, of course, tech is around and has been around for years and years and years. And it's also how we use the tech and how the technology influence or impact us sometimes, and how, again, we have maybe discipline to use it in an appropriate way. So I also, because you have a lot of experience in that matter, and of course you're a coach in mental health, and you met a lot of people, you coach a lot of people. I wanted to ask you if there would be maybe one habit that keeps people, I would say, maybe potentially sometimes trapped in scrolling. So maybe sometimes we speak about addiction of social media. What would be for you what I would call a healthier swap, so a better habit of using social media?
Well, I think that one interesting precondition for not being hooked by what is called the infinite scrolling, right? Which actually was used at the beginning of time for ease of internet navigation. It then became used by social media tech platforms, once again for the ease of scrolling. But this for our brain is too much novelty. So because our brain is so sensitive to novelty, we want more than that. And then maybe you find yourself 20 minutes there. So I think that one very good condition to actually think about not being hooked by the infinite scrolling is to try books and try magazine in analog life. Why? Because they have a natural stop. So think of a chapter of a book, how it naturally finishes, and then you see that full stop, and maybe yourself you just stop because you say, okay, a new chapter is starting. Or think about reading the news on an old-fashioned newspaper. Actually, for me, newspapers are not old-fashioned at all. I'm just saying, because you could do that more easily on an app. However, they won't have that natural stopping, right? You could be an hour on a news app, so to say, which is also a mood hijacker if you read it at night, for example. So my recommendation is to try to alternate between your analog and digital life by actually choosing to do that on purpose. Say that you want to read the news in the morning, and then you could do that on an app. Always set a timer, because if you think this is a black hole, then set a timer, not more than 15 minutes, so to say. And then if you still want to keep reading the news, why don't you get a newspaper? And then you could have the natural stop, because this is actually what prevents us from infinite scrolling.
That's thanks for that. It's very interesting as well what you said, and it's true that we have, of course, the phone in our hands constantly, and it's very easy to even while we are about to go to bed and to read with our phone, taking the habit of having something different, paper in our hands or a book in our hands, is a different feeling as well. So it's a very, very good tip. I try to do that, to be honest with you. I try to be a good student, and I try to read a normal book in the evening. And I can feel a difference between, of course, the peacefulness of reading a book rather than being on the phone. So it's a very good tip, I think, and it's an easy one to implement as well. I believe the fact that to use something different to read and to inform ourselves, or to just put our brain into a rest mode before going to sleep. That's beautiful, beautiful tip right there. I also wanted to connect again with the fact and the feeling of belonging with you. You mentioned, and we tapped on already a little bit about community and maybe having group in different social platform. You mentioned Instagram, it could be LinkedIn, it could be other ones as well. How would you say, how can someone maybe turn this online attention to a more real life belonging. And what I mean
Mm-hmm.
belonging, it's more this feeling of belonging to a community. What is
Mm-hmm.
your take on that one?
So I think that the best thing is for people to have a hobby, because if you think like the reason why a group exists is also because there is a shared interest. So think of a book club, or think of like people who hear a podcast and then they go discuss the podcast of any group connected with sports, with movement. So not only intellectual things, or people who paint. So I think that having a hobby, it's not only a very good analog distraction, right? So if the hobby, of course, has to do with analog life, think of video games. Yeah, that is a hobby nowadays as well. But what if you would put also, you would do some of the video games and then trying to put the community offline to meet and game and do games, like more traditional games in person. So I think that having a hobby or a commonality, a common interest to share is the prerequisite for what you just asked.
Mm. Okay, that's very interesting. You also mentioned earlier on, I think it taps very well on with what you just said. It's to have a variation of activities, right, between digital and non-digital, if I understood you well.
Exactly. Exactly. So taking care of our analog life is just as important of taking care of the digital one.
Mm.
It's, I think, quite important always to say, okay, I have done my time on the digital. Now it's time to bring this to life and make a conscious effort for that. At the beginning, maybe a little bit harder because everyone is having the same issues, right, with this hook on the digital. And then it's a little bit easier because it's a little bit of the trap of convenience, right? It's always with you. It's portable. You can reach anyone anywhere. And the other one entails an effort. But as human beings, it's within our DNA to be animals of social animals. Yeah. So in this way, if we make the little effort, it's just so rewarding in itself. We go back to our ancestral way of being, tribes, right? So if we stimulate that a little bit from time to time and make this conscious choice, then it becomes more natural. So I think that this is my first encouragement to the community, right? So try that at least.
Mm. And that's great. And I think he brings us back also to the health. And you're an expert in mental health as well. And you already explained to us, and I think it was a good tip. If we want to have a good equilibrium between, as you said, the social life, the online life, the digital life, and the real normal life, I would say it's about balance. And you also mentioned putting maybe an alarm on the phone is a very good tip. I wanted, and I remember when we talk together also with the other participant in your seminar, that was very interesting to ask people, when you ask people what is
Mm,
the good habits they might have. I wanted to ask you, because now you have experience and you have
yeah.
experienced a lot of people and you already coached a lot of people. If you would say one healthy phone use that people can do that actually sticks. So from what you have
Mm,
observed, I guess the 20 minutes is a very good one.
mm-hmm,
Is it this one, or is there another one that you say
mm,
usually the people actually manage to stick with it and do
yeah.
that regularly? What would you say? One of the best.
Like there is maybe more than one thing. So one thing that for sure works very well is to stop all notifications. This I would really do,
Mhm.
because some people say, yeah, I don't have the notifications on, and then they maybe forgot that they do have them on. They're just silent, but you can still see them on the screen. So it really works if you really consciously go into the apps without them popping up. So
Mhm.
it's the novelty. Let's remember our brain is very sensitive to novelty, especially younger brains. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, but we're all, anyways, affected by that. If there is novelty and if there is a sense of urgency, our brain gets distracted. So, a very easy thing is just to say, okay, no notification. And then I go on purpose to check those apps from time to time. Say the email app, which I would actually delete it from the phone, even though it's a very hard one because it's very convenient to read the email on the go. But if
Mhm.
from time to time you want to also cancel apps from the phone and then reinstall them on a regular basis. There are people who also say, okay, during the week, I don't want to see social media. I want to do a little bit more social media during the weekend. They cancel the app during the week, they reinstall it during the weekend. Another thing that really works is to really make a list of the apps that are the most distracting to you.
Mhm.
So say you make a list and there are 5 apps which you really like, but they are the most distracting. So What about you think of limiting the time on those apps, or see what you could do as a mini detox, not using that app on the phone, but actually accessing that type of service on a browser, because it makes it more difficult than to go back to the computer, and then potentially you're going to consume less of that if you are not on the go. So there is also a difference, technology on the go and technology that you access on your computer. So why don't you make it a little bit less difficult for yourself to access that and wait for the moment a computer is available? So all those are strategies or mini moments of digital good nutrition that can make really a difference. So those three that I mentioned, they are proved to work really well, at least for me, and also for the social media mini detoxes that I did at the university and on the research which is out there.
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's very powerful what you just said, because of course notification, we get bombarded sometimes by notification, such as again emails or notification different social media, and that can be a bit of stress, as you said, if you receive a lot of them every day, multiple times a day, and you're always constantly looking at them, could potentially create our own stress or this will to open the phone and actually check them and do that constantly. So I think it's a very good tip to actually turn off the notification. And the other tips are, of course, very valid as well. Specifically, as you said, also selecting the apps, right? I have to be honest with you, and I don't know if it's the same for other people, but I've got probably far too many apps on my phone. And I remember you saying as well to do a bit of cleanup as we do in our house, right? And I've done a little bit, I have to say, since we met last time, but that goes with what you just said. So selecting really the app were maybe essential and which one you need to really have on and which one you can turn off, basically, as well.
So if you think of that as a little bit like decluttering your house, you would need to do that periodically. There is no way that we can hoard things, right? So all the time. So um, a very good thing is to think of your digital life exactly as the analog. There will be moments in which you need to do a big cleanup of your house, or there are things that you don't use anymore and you feel they're still useful. Actually, sometimes there is the illusion that this is still useful, but do I really use that? So self-reflection is really the first step. Take some time to just have a good look at your digital life and see what overwhelms you or distracts you more, as if you are decluttering your room.
That's a great tip, Alessandra. So thanks you so much for that. It's also very interesting what you said. The self-reflection is a very important topic, also for mental health, of course. And you spoke about the brain and how the brain works. I wanted to ask you again, if we speak a bit about the nervous system and the signs, and I can take that for myself as well. At what point would you say would you see signs, or we can self-reflect and think, oh, watch out, I'm maybe using too much my phone at the moment. What would be the sign of nervous systems you need to analyze and say, that's a red flag, I need some offline time now, without feeling guilt, because as we just said, maybe we have so many notifications, we feel that we have to address all of them. So how would be a new standpoint with your expertise, a sign to tell people, be careful when you have this sign coming up, you need maybe to step back a little bit and be offline for a little while.
So let's remember that this always has a subjective quality to it, right? So different people are overwhelmed by different things. Maybe what's overwhelming for me or the kind of symptom that I might feel is different from somebody else. So always the subjectivity. In reality, the research and the science out there says that people are having more anxiety than ever. So there has been really a peak more of anxiety, especially also in young adults. So say from 16 to 24 years old, also when the brain is in full development. So people can actually not only experience anxiety, but also sense of overwhelm, headaches, and also any kind of pain, right? Because of the tension of the muscles of the neck, especially. But the research out there really talks about a huge increase on anxiety and the sense of general tiredness. I don't know if you feel that as well. For me, it's always sometimes I feel like a brain fog if I'm too much on technology, especially if I'm doing it on the go. Dry eyes, for me, it's a clear sign that I'm being too much online. So I think those are a little bit of the modern world characteristics But let's remember the subjectivity. But the research is clear on the anxiety issue that we're facing nowadays.
No, that's a very good point. And I think personally, I tried to put the phone in another room and actually take the book and read to calm down. But you're right, during the day, we are so busy, we are constantly behind a screen. And that's, I would say, part of our life, but it's also our choice how much we want to be on those screens and when we decide it's time to do off. So it's very interesting what you just say also about, dry eyes and tiredness as well. How tired am I tired because of the activity I'm doing every day? I'm also maybe tired because I'm bombarded by those different media and those different tools that we have. So it's
But especially at night, yeah, it's exactly what you say, and especially at night, right? So at least an hour before sleeping time, the nervous system, the mind needs to process that we are in a moment of rest. So it's important to make that transition.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. You also mentioned children, and you also mentioned adolescent. One of my passion, and you know it, it's the cross-generation connection or intergenerational connection, how people interact together from different generation. I wanted to ask you because I've experienced many times where I go to a restaurant, for instance, and I see a family, so two adults, two children at the table in a restaurant, and the four of them are actually on their phone. They're not interacting with each other. And I wanted to ask you for families, actually, if you could give me a bit of a tip, how can families maybe create phone-friendly, sure, we're not going to put the phones in a bin, but a bit more human first norms, meaning putting priority to the human connection. So what would you say to families? What would be your tip when families are together, for instance?
It's very true. I really have observed that as well, and there is a lot of discussion on this, especially. So I follow an expert, which is called Jocelyn Brewer, and she talks about digital nutrition. What could families do? And I really like her advice on creating a family contract on use of technology and phones. Say, for example, that a kid has a parent as a role model. So if the mother of a 14 years old says, okay, please don't use the phone after dinner, say 9 p.m. And then the mother or the father themselves, they are on the phone. So you don't give it good role modeling. So the contract that everyone needs to sign in, it could be even written. So everyone signs. It's like an accountability partner. The entire family will be offline as of 9 p.m. unless there is some sort of emergency that needs to be taken care of. Or they can say, okay, we allow the phone for 30 minutes and then before dinner, and then dinner table or in a restaurant or on a birthday, a special day is a device light day, right? So families should be teaming up, like a football team would team up or a volleyball team would team up and say, what are the positions today, right? So today we do that. Because saying, okay, I'm going to forbid that never works, right? As a parent, that we know that we might have seen that this was not working when I was younger myself as a daughter as well, I can say. So why don't everyone does that? So it's called family contract for technology. Yeah.
Yeah. Alessandra, were you a rebel when you were a young teenager?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
But we didn't have mobile phones, so we were rebels on other things, right? So maybe TV time.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Quite fun. I also really, really like what you just said. I think it's very important because it's really inclusion, including the whole family and having all together the same rules instead of excluding the children or the teenagers to have their own rules and the parent, as you say, don't show the example. So I think it's a very
Yeah.
smart tip and smart advice for the whole family. Thanks for that. That's really great.
Absolutely.
Very nice. I'm going to ask you now, if okay with you, a bit of a more personal question about you because you're an expert,
Sure.
and I think it will be interesting for the listener as well to hear for you as a person, as an expert, how do you do personally to protect your relationships in this digital world?
Well, I call a lot.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
I go into what would be considered once again the old-fashioned way. So It's not that I have to be the entire day sending audios, if they are very convenient. I like to use WhatsApp with my friends, especially, but I try to be mindful, especially on birthdays or when I have something to say that is a little bit longer. Let's just connect and call. So then I don't have to be with my phone in my hand all the time. Then I usually have a WhatsApp free day, so I don't look at the WhatsApp up until like 4:30, 5 p.m. So after my work, say, on a specific day, and I try to force myself to respect it. And how I do that is that I tell people, hey, Thursday, it's my WhatsApp free day. So if there is something urgent, just call me or use the text message, for example, the typical text message. So I think, it's about, first I have to realize what was stressing me about, constant WhatsApp use. And then I had to have this conversation with myself. And then I realized that would be the way. I like also calling. And then, I make specific breaks. Also, I take the train a lot and I set my mind into what is called actually in neuroscience, default mode network. When you actually observe the world and there is just nowhere to be, nowhere to go, and actually you don't have to be productive and the mind just wanders. And in that moment, I really try not to have my phone next to me. I just have it in the bag and make it a little bit difficult for me to reach it. So I use these strategies.
That's great. And I think we had the same view of a great research and study from Harvard University about exactly that topic.
Yeah.
Now that's really beautiful what you just said, because I realized that's what you've done, if I understood you well. First, you listened to yourself. So you had some time to self-reflect, of some self-awareness, which is very important to understand what was stressing you out. Then what I think is very smart is that you managed to discipline yourself to block some times where you're not available. And of course, what is great is that you communicate about it. So you entourage, you friends, families, they know from that time to that time. For instance, Alessandra is not available. I think it's a very three-section, very smart plan, actually.
And it's not that it comes without the anxiety, right? Because of course, like I have parents not living in this country, and I always think, okay, there could be something urgent. In reality, it's all about the communication, about how we perceive the urgency. So if you think about this, this is just a modern problem. How were other people doing in other times, right? So if you have to just believe that you're doing the right thing, that maybe while you're sleeping, maybe you would not be of use for any emergency, or having, for example, the typical fixed line phone in case you need somebody to call. Say maybe you have an older parent to look after, then why not switching off your mobile phone, but having a landline so you can still do that. So those things, they still exist and they're still possible to do.
The good old orange phone, right?
Yeah.
70s. Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. Yeah, that's actually a very good tip, that it's still reachable, but on another device, which is only in case of emergency.
Yeah.
That's really a very good, healthy, I think, tip for the listeners. Also, I wanted to come back to a very interesting study you've done with students at the University of St. Gallen. I listened to you when you were presenting the results of that study, and I was a bit gobsmacked from the result and the percentage. I think it's going to be very interesting for the listeners to understand what was the study about, and what was the social media detox. You gave them a bit of a challenge. I wanted to ask you, what was maybe the most surprising thing you learned when you actually interacted with the student and then saw the reaction and the result of this social media detox, when you ask the students not to use their phone and the social media platform for a little while? What was you surprised maybe about that?
Well, that's the social media detox was in fact a limited use of social media apps, but of the phone in general during 5 days. It's a mini one because also research shows that actually, in order for us to really do a little bit of this cleaning, decluttering, we would need approximately 1 month. But in reality, 1 month without the phone, who would do that, right? So you have to try some little periods of time in which you might do some adjustments. And the adjustments was to reach out the phone less, to have a moment in which we use WhatsApp less, or using, for example, right after breakfast instead of just when you woke up, right? And I see that for me, the most interesting result was there was This made me laugh. Less hand pain because, of course, holding the phone and typing with the thumb creates some pain. And then this was less. This made me laugh, but at the same time, it's also important to see how this is affecting our body and our physiology, right? And then at the same time, fascinating was, of course, that people were sleeping more. And surprising was that some people were reporting, okay, I went to sleep or I took a book because I felt so bored without the phone. In reality, perhaps what also the students wanted to say is that they found themselves what they call boredom is just human condition sometimes of not having much to do. So in reality, what we mix up with boredom is the sense that sometimes we don't have to produce or to do something, which is not laziness, it's just being. It's part of our recharge. It's the default mode network of the brain. So, but it was interesting for me to read that it was misplaced with boredom. So I think it's also interesting for students and parents would be really, it would be fascinating if they would get more information on the neuroscience of how the brain works, so that don't feel like they're being useless in that moment. We should not tell ourselves that we are useless when we are doing less.
You're absolutely right. And it gives us also time to use our imagination, maybe be more creative. So that's a very important one. So thanks for sharing that with us. I think it was a very amazing study that you've done at the University of St. Gallen. If I remember well, one of the things which also surprised me when you saw the number, it was about the fact that some of the students, I think it was almost 50% of them, were reporting the self-esteem was higher.
True.
So they have a better self-esteem not using social media. I was a bit also surprised, I have to be honest with you. Well,
And then that self-esteem is very hard to measure, but the variables was actually the presence of more positive thoughts about oneself, because we know that social media has an impact on self-image. So if we would reduce that impact, then maybe we can be a little bit more in touch with ourselves and knowing also how amazing human being you are, right? And then probably doubting yourself less. Self-doubt is a human thing, of course, but maybe have a little bit more closer relationship to ourselves. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Wow, amazing. So I'd like to finish the BrightBond in a positive note again. That's what I call, yes, the BrightBond tip or the BrightBond advice. So Alessandra, you already gave us a load of tips, so I would like already to thank you so much for that. But if there would be one action, a simple action that you think the listeners could take either today or next week, something simple they could implement to have real human moments offline, what would be your tip for them?
Well, I would say set up what I call a purposeless lunch or purposeless breakfast with somebody. Just invite them to do something like before work, after work, and just tell yourself, okay, during these hours, I'm going to just be present and I'm not going to look at the phone. I don't need it because I'm already with the person. So just make the purposeless appointment. And also talk to somebody random on the train, on the tram, on your way home when you're going somewhere walking. Just smile at them and talk to somebody random. Like people are just so in this immersive phone and like earpods kind of situation. Just so ask them, how are you? I mean, I think this brings us to take some risk, which is also what makes us human, right? The risk of having maybe an interesting conversation with somebody you don't know.
That's a beautiful tip, Alessandra. Thank you so much. And you're right, actually, on public transport, we usually in our bubbles. We either have headsets on, watching something or listening to music or reading, but we're not really interacting with each other. So it's a beautiful tip.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. That's amazing. So,
Absolutely, my
Alessandra,
pleasure.
sure. I'd like to thank you so much for this inspirational discussion with you. It was, I think, very practical. People can really apply what you mentioned as tips. It was a great conversation also about health, mental health, and habits that people can have, that they can apply. If I had to summarize briefly this podcast, I think, as you said as well, Alessandra, today we have technology all around us. It's not, I would say, a problem per se, but it's key The key is really how we use it. And
Yeah.
when we use it with awareness, with good intention, it can actually support us to connect, as you mentioned as well, with the different groups. We can connect with other groups, for instance.
Mhm.
But when it's maybe used without boundaries, it can slowly disconnect us from ourselves first and from other people around us as well. So I think, Alessandra, your insight today were a powerful reminder that even with small habits, small steps, we can make a big difference and create real human connection offline. And that's probably one of the most important one to stay healthy and have a well-being. So I'd like to thank you again so much
Thank you, Patrick.
for your tip, for your times. For everyone listening, this week, I'm going to ask you, like every time, what would be your little action? Alessandra already give you a tip. So one action you want to take with you to apply on the go, as she mentioned. There's a lot of tip with how we use the smartphone, but also, again, doing maybe having a coffee, a walk with someone, interacting with people in public transport, whatever the case might be. You choose. But try to take a little action, a little step. And I would like, of course, to thank you all for listening to BrightBond and this inspirational episode. If you found it good, if it gave you some warmth, please don't hesitate to share it with someone else who might need it. And to all of you, I'd like to say take good care of yourself and see you next time on BrightBond. Bye for now, and thank you very much. Thank you, Alessandra, again.
Bye. Thank you so much,
Bye.
Patrick. Bye bye, everyone.